August 1st, 1966. The heat in Austin, Texas was unforgiving. Just before noon, 18-year-old Claire Wilson stepped into the sun with her boyfriend, Tom Ekman. They had just finished lunch and were walking across the University of Texas campus to feed a parking meter. She was 8 months pregnant. The world for her was full of promise, a new life with Tom, and another growing inside her. But high above them, from the 32nd floor of the university's clock tower, a man was watching. His name was Charles Whitman, former Marine, eagle-eyed marksman, and by that day, a killer waiting to unleash the worst mass shooting America had ever seen. He wasn't aiming randomly. He had already killed his wife and mother that morning. He had climbed the tower with 7 guns, a footlocker of ammunition, and a plan. Now, through the scope of his rifle, he locked eyes not with a crowd, but with a single target, a young, pregnant woman. The first shot echoed like thunder. The bullet hit Claire directly in the stomach. It tore through her womb and, with clinical precision, killed the child she was carrying. Claire dropped to the pavement, blood pooling around her. Tom, desperate, turned to help and was shot in the chest. He died instantly. In one heartbeat, the promise of new life was shattered. The shooter had chosen Claire deliberately, and from that moment, the tower became a battlefield. Before her name was etched into the darkest chapter of American history, Claire Wilson was just a girl in love. 18 years old, soft-spoken and hopeful, she was studying art and philosophy at the University of Texas. She wore her hair long, loved animals, and often spent afternoons sketching or reading in the shade of the campus trees. Her boyfriend, Tom Ekman, matched her energy, kind, protective, and deeply in love. The two were inseparable. By that summer, Claire was 8 months pregnant with their first child. They hadn't planned it, but they hadn't run from it either. In a time when others might have vanished in shame, Claire and Tom faced it together. They were looking forward to becoming a family, maybe even getting married after graduation. They had names picked out. They had hope. That morning, August 1st, they did what couples do. They walked across campus hand in hand. They had lunch. They laughed. And then they strolled across the plaza, the famous South Mall, on their way to pay for parking. Claire likely never noticed the man in the tower. He was too high up, too far away. There were students walking by, music in the distance, a few voices calling across the grass. It was just another Monday. But in the shadows of the tower, Charles Whitman was watching them, studying them, and at some point, for reasons only he fully understood, he chose them as the first to fall. At 11:48 in the morning, the quiet cracked like glass. From the observation deck of the University of Texas clock tower, Charles Whitman fired his first shot. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't wild. It was cold, precise, and deliberate. Through his scoped rifle, he aimed at Claire Wilson's visibly pregnant stomach. The bullet struck her just below the ribs. It passed through her abdomen, shattering the fragile skull of her unborn child before tearing through her back. Claire collapsed instantly onto the scorching concrete. Her body convulsed from shock. She was conscious, bleeding heavily, and too afraid to move. Tom Ekman, standing just inches away, dropped to his knees and reached out to help her. A second shot ripped through his chest. He fell backward, lifeless before his head even hit the ground. Students nearby froze. At first, no one knew what was happening. Some thought it was a firecracker or construction. But then came another shot and another. Claire lay exposed under the blistering Texas sun. Her baby was gone. Her partner was gone. And she couldn't scream because the slightest movement could make her a target again. Above her, Whitman reloaded slowly. He didn't look rushed. He wasn't panicked. This was a sniper at war, and Claire had been his opening statement. The plaza exploded into chaos, but it was a silent kind of terror. No sirens, No shouting, just the sound of gunfire echoing from above like thunder in a blue sky. Students sprinted for cover behind fountains, statues, and low walls. Others dropped flat to the ground, paralyzed by confusion. From 32 stories up, Charles Whitman had a sniper's paradise, wide open space, clear sight lines, and a panicked crowd below. Claire Wilson lay motionless on the pavement. Her blood seeped across the sun-baked concrete. Her skin blistered under the heat. For a moment, everyone thought she was dead, maybe even she did. But she wasn't. She was aware. She could feel the heat. She could feel the pain. And most of all, she could feel the silence closing in around her. Every time she tried to move, another shot rang out somewhere nearby. People saw her. They saw Tom's body beside her, but nobody could reach her. Anyone who tried was immediately met with another bullet from above. One student attempted to crawl toward her. Whitman fired within seconds. The boy barely made it back alive. Whitman never fired twice at the same person. That was a rule he had learned in the Marines: one shot, one kill. Claire was alive because of it, and dying because of it. Minutes passed like hours. The blood loss, the heat, the heartbreak. Claire remained in the sniper's line of fire for over 90 minutes, her body limp, her unborn child lifeless inside her. The whole campus had become a battlefield, and Claire, still breathing, was left stranded on the front line. Charles Joseph Whitman wasn't some faceless monster. He was 25 years old, former Eagle Scout, former Marine, an honor student. On paper, he looked like success: sharp, clean-cut, intelligent. But inside his mind, something had been boiling for years. In the months leading up to the shooting, Whitman had complained of blinding headaches, violent thoughts, and emotional outbursts he couldn't control. He wrote in his journal about a feeling he didn't understand, a storm building inside him. He even visited a campus psychiatrist and begged for help, saying he was afraid of what he might do. But the system failed him. On the night of July 31st, just hours before the massacre, Whitman sat down and typed a suicide note. In it, he wrote, "I do not really understand myself these days. I am supposed to be an average, reasonable, and intelligent young man. However, lately I cannot recall when it started. I have been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts." Then he murdered his wife, Kathy, stabbing her as she slept. He left a note beside her body. After that, he drove to his mother's apartment and killed her too, both women silenced before sunrise. By morning, Whitman packed a duffel bag with 7 firearms, boxes of ammunition, water, food, rope, binoculars, a radio, even deodorant. He wasn't going on a rampage. He was going to war. At 11:35, he reached the observation deck of the tower. At 11:48, he took aim, and his first shot, the one he chose with surgical intent, was fired at a young pregnant woman named Claire Wilson. From the top of the tower, Charles Whitman unleashed a storm. He had brought with him a small arsenal, a scoped Remington 700 rifle, an M1 carbine, a sawed-off shotgun, 2 pistols, a machete, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. He was dressed in workman's overalls to avoid suspicion and had bluffed his way past campus staff by claiming he was doing maintenance. Once he reached the 32nd floor, he barricaded the stairwell with a desk and began his ambush from the observation deck, taking a position behind a waist-high parapet. Whitman didn't shoot randomly. He took time with each shot. He scanned the plaza, tracked movement, adjusted for distance and wind, and pulled the trigger like a trained sniper. His Marine Corps background made him deadly accurate. Each shot was aimed with purpose. Each one found a target. By the time local police realized what was happening, it was already too late. Emergency calls were flooding in, but responders couldn't reach the scene. Ambulances were pinned down by rifle fire. Officers arriving on foot had to crawl, duck and run from cover to cover. It was like stepping into a war zone, and the enemy had the high ground. For an hour and a half, Whitman held his position, firing at anyone who moved. Some victims were over 500 yards away. He hit them anyway. In total, he would fire nearly 150 rounds from the tower. Claire Wilson was still lying in the open, bleeding, silent and alone as the world around her crumbled into panic. She had become the silent symbol of a nation stunned by the realization that violence could now reign from above. Claire Wilson lay on the ground for 90 full minutes, 90, under the scorching Texas sun, with her unborn child gone, with Tom lying dead beside her, shot through the stomach, unable to move. Every minute that passed was another gamble. If she twitched, breathed too loudly, or looked alive, she risked drawing another bullet, so she played dead and did it perfectly. From the tower, Charles Whitman never fired twice at the same target. It was his rule. He believed in precision, one shot, one kill, and that rule is the only reason Claire survived. She drifted in and out of consciousness, skin blistering from the heat, dress soaked in blood. Her body had gone into shock. Her baby was no longer moving, and still she clung to life. All around her, people watched helplessly. Some were crying, some were frozen. A few brave souls tried to inch toward her, but every time they did, Whitman let off a warning, a bullet just close enough to make them retreat. It wasn't until a group of 3 civilians, a student, a teacher, and a stranger with no weapon made the decision to crawl across the plaza that anything changed. They moved inch by inch. One of them, Alan Crum, kept his eyes on the tower, ready to shield Claire with his body if it came to that. When they reached her, they didn't expect her to be alive. But then she moved, just barely, a hand, a blink, something too human to ignore. They lifted her as gently as they could, shielding her with their own bodies, dragging her out of the sniper's sightline. And somehow, through all of it, through blood loss, heat stroke, and grief so sharp it could slice open your soul, Claire Wilson lived. While Claire was being carried to safety, officers on the ground were scrambling to end the nightmare. But the tower was a fortress 32 stories high, thick stone walls, narrow staircases. Getting to Whitman meant one thing: someone had to go up. 2 Austin police officers, Houston McCoy and Ramiro Martinez, volunteered. They were joined by a civilian named Alan Crum, the same man who had helped save Claire moments earlier. The trio moved fast and silent, climbing stair by stair with weapons drawn, knowing that at any second Whitman could hear them coming. They reached the 27th floor and found the barricade Whitman had built with a dolly and desk. They pushed through it. Beyond the glass doors to the observation deck, the sound of gunfire echoed. Whitman was still active, still hunting. At exactly 1:24 in the afternoon, they stepped out. Martinez went first, firing his revolver in Whitman's direction. Whitman turned and returned fire, but missed. In that split second, Houston McCoy raised his shotgun and fired 2 rounds point blank. The first hit Whitman in the upper left side. The second tore through his neck and face. Charles Whitman collapsed onto the deck dead. A 3rd officer rushed in and fired 1 more round into his body, just to be sure. From the first shot to the final blast, the massacre lasted 96 minutes. 16 people lay dead, 31 more were wounded, and an entire country had just witnessed what it looked like when violence came from the sky. But amid all the carnage, Claire Wilson was still breathing. She had survived. But her life, like the world around her, would never be the same. The bodies were counted. The plaza was cleared. Blood still stained the concrete where Claire had fallen. The silence after the gunfire was louder than the bullets ever were. Charles Whitman was taken to the morgue. But what came next only deepened the mystery. During the autopsy, doctors discovered something alarming: a tumor, roughly the size of a nickel, lodged deep in his brain, pressing against the amygdala, the region that controls fear, aggression, and emotional regulation. It was an astrocytoma, slow growing but dangerously placed. Could it have caused his violent urges? Could it explain the chilling calm with which he murdered his wife, his mother, and so many strangers? In his suicide note, Whitman himself seemed to believe something was wrong. He had written, "I have been a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts." He even requested that doctors examine his brain after his death. That's exactly what they did, and what they found left the public stunned. The debate ignited immediately: was Charles Whitman evil or sick? Was the tower shooting an act of cold calculation or a breakdown caused by something no one could see? For Claire Wilson, the answers didn't matter. She spent 3 months in the hospital recovering from her wounds. Surgeons worked tirelessly to save her uterus. She underwent multiple operations. The baby, a boy, had been removed by cesarean shortly after the shooting. He was already gone. Claire would never have another biological child. But she lived. Years later, she adopted. She built a life. She carried her trauma with grace, refusing to be defined by that day, even as the country kept looking back. And every time the story of the tower was retold, it always began the same way with Claire. The first shot, the first scream, the first proof that no place was truly safe anymore. There's a photo, maybe you've seen it. A young woman lies on her side on the sunlit concrete, her arms twisted beneath her, one leg bent awkwardly. A pool of blood fans out beneath her. Her long dress clings to her belly, swollen from pregnancy. Just feet away, the body of her boyfriend lies motionless. Around them, the plaza is empty, as if time itself froze. That woman is Claire Wilson. The image became one of the most haunting photos in American history. It wasn't graphic, it wasn't staged, but it captured in one still frame the moment America realized something unthinkable: that violence could strike from above in broad daylight without warning, and that anyone, even a girl just steps away from motherhood, could be the target. For decades, Claire tried to move forward. She changed her last name. She gave interviews only when it felt right. She never glamorized what happened, never fed into the spectacle. She didn't want to be remembered as a victim, but as a survivor and a witness. She became a counselor, a teacher, a mother, but the pain never fully left. How could it? The loss of her child, the silence on that concrete, the minutes stretching into eternity as no one could reach her. Those memories stayed stitched into the seams of her life. Yet Claire refused to be broken. She testified. She taught. She reminded the world what trauma looked like up close, and how survival didn't always mean healing, but fighting to find meaning in the wreckage. And today, every time someone speaks about the University of Texas shooting, every time that tower is mentioned or that photo resurfaces, they are forced to remember not just the shooter, but the woman who lived. Claire Wilson wasn't just a bystander. She was the first target, the first scream, the first life he tried to erase. But she didn't vanish. She endured. Claire Wilson was never supposed to walk again, never supposed to smile again, never supposed to carry life after that day, and yet she did. She didn't just survive the most infamous mass shooting of her time, she outlived it. She buried a child she never got to meet. She lost the love of her life beside her on the pavement, and for 90 unbearable minutes she lay still waiting to die, while the world around her turned to chaos. But she didn't die. She became a symbol of what we lose when evil takes aim at innocence. A reminder that trauma leaves marks far deeper than bullet wounds, and proof that resilience isn't loud sometimes, It's just breathing when you shouldn't be alive. So let me ask you this. Was Charles Whitman a monster or a man broken by something he couldn't control? And does that even matter to the people he left behind? Comment your thoughts below. Because stories like Claire's don't fade, they echo. They demand to be remembered. If this story moved you, share it. If it made you angry, tell someone. And if you're still here, still watching, thank you, because remembering is the first step to never repeating. Until next time, stay safe and don't forget the ones who lived.